today. Throughout the fall, Alberta education staff met with every school authority and attended many, many other meetings with key groups within the broader education system. I've also toured most of the province since becoming minister, meeting with school boards and other education partners in their communities. During these visits, I heard a lot of ideas about how to better run the system. This was a significant engagement, and both my department and I have learned much about what we can do to improve the system. The model I'm announcing today is based on what we heard and what the system has said needed to change over the past number of years. 15 years to be exact. That is how long the current model was in place. Today, we are announcing key themes and changes. Put simply, this new funding model is a better way to do things. It is predictable and sustainable. It is more efficient. It reduces red tape. It gives school boards more flexibility and autonomy. And as I said at the very start, it drives more dollars to the classroom. The financial details will be available along with actual funding allotments on February 27th after the budget is released. While I cannot get into the specific numbers today, what I can say is this. Because our new model streamlines operations and pushes more dollars to school boards, every school board in this province will see an increase in funding for the upcoming school year. And I'd like to repeat that. By streamlining operations and driving more money towards our boards, every single board in this province will see an increase in their funding for the upcoming 2020-21 school year. This is one of the most important pieces of the entire model and is something that parents and students and staff can celebrate. This result was only achievable with the input from our education partners around the province. I want to express my sincere thanks to all the school authorities and system officials who took the time to collaborate with me and my department staff on how we could improve the way we flow dollars out to the system. We really listened, and their valuable input is reflected in this new model. Now let's get into some of the details. As I said, the new funding model gives school boards predictable and sustainable funding, something that they have been asking for many, many years. We are moving to a 3-year weighted moving average to determine how much funding each board gets. What this means is that schools will know their funding well in advance of the school year. There will be no more waiting until final enrollment numbers come in the fall for boards to know how much funding they will get. They will have the confidence to set a budget in the spring and know that it will not change. The model also gives more autonomy and flexibility. We heard loud and clear that 36 grant envelopes and all the reporting and administration that go along with them was much too much. This onerous reporting limited a board's ability to direct dollars to where they felt it was most needed in their communities, and it created way too much red tape. I am pleased to say that we have found efficiencies and have shifted around dollars within the bigger education envelope so that there are fewer grants to deal with. But let me be perfectly clear. This has not led to fewer dollars. We are continuing to uphold our campaign commitment by maintaining education funding at current levels, $8.223 billion. And by removing some of the strings on funding, it enables local trustees to have more say on how to invest provincial dollars, which is what they've been elected by their local communities to do. Also, I want to stress that support will continue to be there for children who need extra help. It was important to keep separation for some specific grants that help children with additional needs beyond a standard education. This includes supports for children with special needs who require those targeted dollars available to be successful in an inclusive learning environment. It also includes targeted support for areas such as English as a second language, refugees, First Nation and Métis and Inuit students. Additionally, Program unit funding, or PUF funding, continues to be an important part of our new model. There is another benefit I want to touch upon related to sustainability. The McKinnon panel report made it clear that we have to stop doing things the same way if we expect to bend the curve on provincial spending and get a better bang for our taxpayer dollar. Education is a huge part of this. Since the model was last updated 15 years ago, education operational spending has grown by 80%, well above inflation of 33% and enrollment growth of 25%. We've grown operationally by 80%. This is simply not sustainable. With this new way of doing things, based on the thoughtful input of our education partners, we are getting the system back on track while driving as many dollars as possible to the classroom. Today is an exciting day, 15 years in the making. Alberta has always been on the cutting edge with our education system, and I'm happy to say this will continue with our new funding model. It is predictable, it is flexible, it removes red tape, it is sustainable, and most importantly, it increases funding for every school division next year to allow them to better support their students and continue working to improve outcomes. I would like to again thank all of the school divisions and system partners who helped us through this process. This would not have been possible without a strong and collaborative education system. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Barry Latoon from the College of Alberta School Superintendents to say a few words.
Thank you, Minister. I'm pleased to extend the following on behalf of our President, Bevan Davern, who was not able to be here today. So CAS recognizes significant efforts the Minister LaGrange has taken to engage with individual school authorities, the CAS board, and other educational partners in the development of this funding framework. The Minister's willingness to listen and incorporate this feedback is clear as the new funding framework reflects a return to increased autonomy for local board decision-making, coupled with the reduction of the red tape that have been challenges over recent years. Among the positive of today's announcement are the revenue certainty allows system leaders and their boards to have more efficient planning as they prepare their budgets. We learned that there will be absolute certainty by April of this year for the next school year budget, and in future years by March of each year. I think a point that needs to be emphasized is the new assurance model that is combined with the new funding framework is something that all school authorities have been requesting for many years. The 6 pilot school authorities have been have spoke very positively of the assurance framework, and this is something that we would look to see all school authorities accepting next year. The meeting on February 28th, in which all the details will be provided immediately the day after the budget of the funding framework, followed by individual opportunities for all school authorities to meet individually with the ministry staff to further discuss their funding profile, is another positive and I guess an example of the minister's commitment to transparency with regards to budget. While we recognize the fiscal challenges our province is experiencing, we appreciate hearing the minister's comments that every school authority will be receiving an increase in funding for 2021 versus the current school year.
So before we get to questions, I just want to address some blatant misinformation that MLA Sarah Hoffman was spreading this morning. I want to be crystal clear. Program unit funding remains as one of the key grants under this new model. Students with disabilities will continue to receive the support they need. For Ms. Hoffman to parade 3 parents and a child in front of the media to further her political agenda, I believe is shameful. She needs to come out, explain to those parents and that child why she was proven wrong this afternoon. This is yet another example of when Ms. Hoffman was proven wrong by our government. She said we were cutting the nutrition program, but we invested an additional $3 million. It's time for the NDP to stop misleading Albertans and start telling them about the facts. Again, program unit funding remains under our new model. I'm proud to be moving forward with this new model, which has support from across the system, including rural, urban, and metro boards. It increases funding to every single school division across this province, and it provides the flexibility and the predictability boards have long been asking for. So now I'll turn it over to questions.
So the
Minister,
program
I'm going to
unit,
figure out exactly, it's difficult, I think you'd agree, Minister, to determine, to assess this announcement because we don't have the numbers. Because as you say, you're changing programs, it looks like you're going to be cutting some administration, but we don't know how much and we don't know how much is going. So why are we doing this now? Why don't we do this when we have the budget numbers?
Well, this is a very complex system, and going from the old model to the new model, we just wanted to make sure that people had a chance to look at the overall themes prior to moving to next week when we actually give you the numbers, the specific numbers. There are no cuts to education, and I just want to be perfectly clear on that.
Adding money in the classroom, who's losing it?
We are not cutting money to the classroom.
So it's got to come from somewhere.
So
Where's it
the
coming
dollars are coming through efficiencies and the reduction in red tape. And as I said earlier, there's going to be opportunities for administration to find ways to do things differently.
so this particular model favors rural schools over urban schools, it appears, because
I would say this model is equitable.
No, but it favors schools that with declining enrollments as opposed to schools with increasing enrollments. And I think you would agree, Minister, that the urban schools are the ones that are seeing the rapidly increasing enrollments. So we were given examples of the formula with actual numbers, and that is true. So why is the government favoring rural schools over urban schools?
We are favoring all education, and what we are really trying to do is even out the ebbs and flows of increases and decreases across the system. And what we're looking at is something that boards have been asking for a very, very long time. I was a school board trustee for 11 and a half years, and from the very beginning, we wanted that sustainable, predictable funding so that we can actually know early on how to make informed, proper decisions.
So are you suggesting that the Calgary Board of Education and, say, the Edmonton Public School Board, which are the two biggest school boards in the province, want this system that would actually, they would not be favored as much as a board that has decreasing enrollment? You're saying that they would like
the boards
this system?
would like sustainable, predictable funding. They want to know early on what their dollar allocations will be rather than waiting to September 30th. They can make informed decisions for their whole system, knowing that these are the dollars that they will have. And it really is an equitable.
Is this the system they wanted? Did
They
the Calgary Board of
took part.
Education and
They took part in the collaborative efforts, and we do have actual quotes that we've put out there from all of our partners, including the metros.
I don't see anybody from the Calgary Board of Education or the Edmonton Public School Board in your release. I see someone from the Calgary Catholic Board.
Well, they
You also
are
have the
metro board.
ASBA, Minister. I mean, your list of validators.
ASBA is on the one that was online
Okay.
that I offered to pass out before this.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, just that.
Minister, you
Yeah.
go from 36 grants to 15, and I know you can't give us numbers, but can you speak to, will some of those 15 grants be then higher to make up for those cuts, or can you explain kind of how you can say that?
Again, there are no cuts. This is a totally
Well,
different
you're going
system
from
of way to.
36 to 15, so can you explain how you're still providing more
So
funding?
it is just a reallocation, re-looking at the way, reformatting, if I may say, of the way education is being dispersed currently. So the dollars will, under these new 15 grants, will actually reach every single school board, and they will have that opportunity to have that flexibility to target those dollars in those pocket areas. I just can't get into the specifics of it. I'd be happy to answer all those specific questions next week after we put forward the budget with the dollar amounts.
But it is more, right? It is more, this 15 than the 36, is what we heard in the tech brief.
Total.
There will, total bottom line to school divisions, every single school division will actually receive more funding in the 2020-21 school year because of the efficiencies, the containment of red tape and administrative.
But the money available to them, is that going to be more? I get that they can get savings, but is the money available to them?
The money available to them, the bottom line will actually be more than they will have received in the 18-19.
So we do have a few callers on the line. We're going to shift to them for a moment. Moderator, could you please put through the first caller?
Yeah, our first question is from Tim Kalinowski with the Lethbridge Herald. Tim, your line is open.
Yes, hello, Minister. I do know our local school board has informed us that there was $2 million shortfall in their budget this year due to government cuts to 3 grant cycles: the class size grant, the classroom improvement fund, and the school fees reduction grant. The majority of that was accounted for by the class size grants, which amounted to about $5 million in cut. That's from our local public school website. If there's any questions about those facts, they're there. But I guess my question is this new formula going to allow Lethbridge School Division to make up some of that loss of $5 million that they aren't going to get under the class size grant?
Again, I just want to reiterate that we will be maintaining education funding envelope at $8.223 billion. And with the new funding model, every school division will see an increase to their bottom line dollars that they will be receiving in the 2020-21 school year.
If there's no follow-up, moderator, could you please put forward the next caller?
The next question is from Liam Verster with Everything Grand Prairie. Liam, your line is open.
Thanks. I think I had pretty much the exact same question here. So when you say there's going to be an increase or it's maintained, is that the same as having the transition grant in place again next year, or are we expecting to see sort of funds that would be without that?
I'm sorry, I didn't. Can you repeat the question? I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, so my question was sort of the same as the last guy. So with the funds that were removed in the last budget, and we saw a transition grant given to the schools as well, sort of to make up for that, but it's still, like, really our school board still lost, our school division still lost $3 million despite the 1.5 that was given. So are we expected, when you say there's going to be an increase or it's maintained, is it going to be the same, like a similar budget to what we saw this year, but without the transition grant, or are we expecting an increase? And do you have a percentage if that's the case?
Well, again, I can't get into the specifics, but I just want to go back to there was no funding cuts last year. There were 3 grants that were repurposed to fund enrollment growth, and that's what we did with those particular grants. In this new funding model, every school division will see an increase to their bottom line. And without getting into the specific details, which I can certainly get into next week after budget, and would be happy to at that point in time, we are maintaining the overall budget at $8.223 billion, and we are absolutely ensuring that every school division is funded appropriately.
Right, so follow up to that, you said there were no cuts, but the documents that the Alberta's Teachers Association released last week shows that, for example, our school division, with those grants removed, that's $3 million less that the school division is receiving. Now, wouldn't you consider that a cut?
We kept the overall budget flat at $8.223 billion, which is exactly what we said we were going to do. We are keeping it flat this year as well at $8.223 billion, I should say. And what I'm happy to say is that this new funding and assurance model absolutely will look at ensuring that we have that sustainable, predictable funding so school boards can make informed decisions. And last year, with the budget coming later, and also the huge insurance issues that school boards faced, there were other challenges. But right now, I'm happy to say that we have the new funding and assurance model that will provide that sustainable, predictable funding that all school boards are looking for.
We'll move back to the floor.
Minister, when you talk about how the red tape or cutting red tape is supposed to save more money and the lack of need required to redo medical assessments and so forth. What's the global dollar figure of the amount that you think the administrative reductions will save? And will it be Alberta Education saving that money or school boards?
Well, school boards ultimately disperse the funds. They are the ones that are tasked with once they receive the funding. 98% of the funding flows from my department directly to school boards to administer funding. So those efficiencies are things that the school boards themselves, and they'll vary school board to school board. Perhaps, Barry, do you have any comment on that particular? I don't have an exact number at this point.
Have a ballpark? I mean, surely if you were saying, okay, this is going to save enough money that we can actually give increases for student funding in some scenarios, you must have a ballpark of how much these reduced administrative burden would save you.
What I don't have a figure, but what I can say as a former principal and as a former superintendent, that there were many things that we were required to do that caused us to have staff specifically work on it, whether it came to the funding model for high schools, some of the inclusive ed funding. And so by not being required to do those in the future, you can have those individuals work towards other things that are more directly beneficial with students.
Minister, we have to know a number. You're telling us to take your assurance on a leap of faith here that cutting red tape and cutting medical assessments is going to save the system dollars that are going to go back in the classroom. People need to know how much this money is. Like, how much is it?
As I said earlier, we are absolutely driving every dollar that we possibly can to the classroom. And at the end of the day, we are going to have more dollars reaching the students and more resources.
You can't tell us how much it is.
I will absolutely share that we are going to maintain an $8.223 billion budget. And we are going to ensure that school boards actually have more dollars to operate next year with.
You can't tell us. You can't tell us.
To Michelle's question, why are we having a news conference where you're announcing big savings for Albertans and you can't tell us what the savings are, and you don't give us the information so we can gauge whether or not it's actually a good idea? Sounds like this is just a political news conference so you can get a big hit to say we're actually adding money to schools, and we have no way of figuring out how or what.
We will absolutely provide you those details next week after the
budget. Why are you doing this today, Minister?
Well,
why
because
why not do this a week from now? Why not do this after the budget?
Because this is a very complex change. It's going from a funding model that is going to be now totally different. It's going to be comparing apples to oranges, and we wanted to give yourselves and the general public the opportunity to know that this is going to be a different system than they were used to. This is new and it's innovative, and it will provide that, as I said, sustainable, predictable funding, which every school board has been clamoring for years and years and years. And so it is important that we get out the concepts so everyone can have an idea. Next week, when you see the actual numbers, then you can start actually asking those detailed
Last
questions.
question.
The concept was in your budget, Minister, so the concept isn't new. So how is not...
Well, the concept
you're
is
saying
new.
you want to clarify the situation. How is this clarifying what's happening with school funding? By announcing this without any background or any numbers. How are you clarifying?
Well, to give you the broad strokes so that next week, when you see the actual numbers, they make sense.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was the last question. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We've got Sarah Hoffman, opposition education critic, who'll make a brief statement and then take your questions.